In a previous video, we went over some basic output bus functionality. These were things like EQ, dynamics, and inserting a graphic EQ. Now let's take a look at some more advanced functions. These are things like changing your bus setup and changing your output patch. In some situations, you wish to have a single output bus feed multiple locations. Let's say you have mix bus number 1 and you want that to go to the stage plus an overflow room. This can be done by changing your output patch. Let's take a look at how we set that up. Let's take a look at the screen. If you look up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see that I have mix number 1 selected. I'm going to change my output patch so that mix number 1 feeds the stage as well as my overflow room. I'm going to do this by changing the patch. Let's say that our stage is connected to Dante output number 1 and our overflow room is connected to Dante output number 39. Let's touch in the patch area to open up the Patch and Name window. Here in the Patch and Name window, you'll want to make sure that you're looking at the Patch tab. Looking at this tab, you'll see that mix number 1 is currently patched to Dante number 1, Omni number 1, and slot number 1, port number 1. I need to add one more patch to this mix so that mix number 1 will feed Dante output number 39. I'm going to select over here on the left where it says Dante 33-64. On this page, I can select Dante output number 39. Now, mix number 1 is patched to Dante number 1, Dante number 39, Omni number 1, and slot number 1, port number 1. This is how we can change our mix output to feed multiple locations. You can do the same thing with your matrix outputs, your stereo outputs, and your mono output. Now, let's take a look at how we can change the configuration of our output buses. To change how your buses are configured, touch Setup on the right-hand side of the screen. Then touch Bus Setup. Here, on the Bus Setup pop-up, we can see the different options that we have available for our mix and matrix buses. Your mix buses can be configured in 3 different ways: variable pre-EQ, variable pre-fader, and fixed. When a mix is set to variable pre-EQ, this means that the source of that signal will come before your EQ, your dynamics, and your fader. When a mix is set to variable pre-fader, this means the source of that signal will come after the EQ, after dynamics processor number 1, after dynamics processor number 2, and before the fader. When a mix is set to fixed, this will have that mix act as your subgroup. This is the same as pressing the 1-2 button on your analog console. Now, just because we have our mixes set to variable pre-EQ or variable pre-fader does not mean that it's going to be pre-fader every time. You can still choose post-fader for that mix on your individual channel. This just changes the source of that signal. Each one of those mixes can be set to either stereo or dual mono. To change a mix to stereo, touch the stereo icon. When stereo is selected, you have the option of initiating Pan Link. When Pan Link is selected, the panning to your stereo mix will be exactly the same as the panning to your main stereo bus. Let's go back and take a look at one of our input channels and see how the changes that we've made affect the 16 mixes on that channel. Looking at input channel number 15, we see that mixes 1 and 2 are still behaving the same as mixes 3 and 4. Turning the selected channel encoder for that mix will also adjust the amount of signal going to that mix from those channels. Mixes 5 and 6 were set to fixed. We can assign a signal to them by turning it on. Mixes 7 and 8 are now stereo with Pan Link active. Adjusting the pan encoder will also adjust the pan for that signal going to that mix. We can adjust the level of that mix by choosing the even encoder. Mixes 9 and 10 are also set to stereo, but in this case, Pan Link is not active. Therefore, the panning to this stereo mix is independent.